22 years ago, I came to Geneva, Switzerland as a student to learn about international dispute resolution and the peaceful settlement of conflicts. I'm back here today as a speaker at the C5 conference, where I'll be talking about problems of award enforcement, obstacles, but also opportunities for parties seeking to enforce arbitral awards across borders. My focus will be on the present and perhaps the future. But did you know that the past of international dispute settlement has been markedly shaped by the city of Geneva, that the emergence of international arbitration as a means to peacefully resolve conflicts is intimately linked to the city of Geneva? Hop with me on a journey through time and we'll explore all that. Let's go. I'm standing here now with Jeremy Lack. For those of you who don't know him, he's an eminent international disputes lawyer here in Geneva, multiply qualified, but he also happens to know a great deal about the history of international arbitration, about the history of Geneva as an international arbitration, and more broadly speaking, as a hub of multilateralism and of dispute resolution. Happy to have you here, Jeremy.
Axel, thank you for the invitation.
You asked us to come to this place.
Yes.
Why are we here?
So we're here because, people think about Geneva and they think about the Protestant Reformation and so on, but the history of Geneva in conflict resolution, for me, kind of starts here. It's epitomized by this very place we're standing. Why? Because first of all, we have cannons around us, and the cannons are one of the most traditional forms of conflict resolution, which we're trying to move away from and evolve away from. But what have we done that is different? And it's summarized in these three murals behind us. So the first mosaic on your left shows Julius Caesar coming to conquer Geneva. And that is, I think, already historically important because Geneva was already perceived as being a center for trade by the Romans. This was a way to bring lumber, timber, all the way from up here, because the Rhone River starts here, all the way down to the Mediterranean.
As we're really at the crossroads of Europe here, between the north and the south.
Absolutely. And so this was a logical place to already create something. By the way, jumping several centuries, millennia ahead, we still have huge amounts of international trade. Trade financing, commodities trading is all happening in Geneva as well. So that history, maybe it's linked to Julius Caesar or not, I can't say, but it had this historical importance. And what's really important that we forget about is that even in medieval times, that's the second picture you see here, you're seeing basically craftsmen from around the world who come and meet here to do trade. I mean, I'm not going to say Geneva was important as Venice, but it was kind of a mini Venice in its own way, because you wanted to trade in certain types of materials. You would come here, and so you had people coming from around the world. So there was this intercultural, international aspect just in trade in the Middle Ages already.
And I believe this is where the marketplace was?
So this is the marketplace that was there.
And the courthouse was just across the street.
Actually, if you look to your right, you see some benches, and apparently that was the civil court of Geneva. So this place is even built with a design of access to justice built into it as a marketplace with access to the court if ever you had a conflict. But then moving on, we get to the most, I'd say, famous, most recent reason why people associate Geneva with peacemaking, which is this concept of religious tolerance. When you had the Protestant Reformation, obviously you had some countries that were Catholic that had a deep distrust and concern with the Protestant movement. And likewise, in the Protestant North, there was a deep kind of concern with papists, people following the Pope. And so Geneva was at that boundary. In fact, they were fighting back and forth to try and conquer Geneva. But Geneva became this place that was a refuge. So a lot of, Wesley, Knox, a lot of people just came through Geneva to go on to United States or elsewhere. Obviously, we had Calvin who stayed here. But Geneva was perceived as the city of tolerance, especially for the outside world. So private banking, you could bring your assets here and feel you were safe, even if your family felt it had to travel around the world. So, and you see in the last mural, the Huguenots, the Protestants fleeing Catholic France to find refuge in Geneva, which is part of the history. So I think that by the time, and you also have Solferino, post-Solferino, you have Henri Dunant coming with what basically becomes the Red Cross, and you then get the League of Nations in 1924, well, this predates other events, but you see this constant history in Geneva of not just kind of political United Nations related, but also from the private sector, from the educational sector. We have CERN, we have in life sciences and biotechnology, huge international projects going on here as well. Geneva's just been this small city of 500,000 people, not even, and yet it has this outreach that's very international. You know, people talk about 6 degrees of separation. For most people, you know everybody else through 6 people. In Geneva, it's 3 degrees of separation. You really can connect very quickly.
It's a village market in the end.
In a way, yes, but a global one.
Yes. If we track it back to one formative event in the history of international arbitration, it would be the Alabama case. I'll briefly say for our audience what the case is about. It's essentially something that happened after the American Civil War, when the U.S. government, under what was then the administration of President Ulysses S. Grant, figured that all the things that the Brits had done to help the insurgent Confederate states, the secessionists, should not be left unanswered. And specifically, Britain had ships built and supplied to the Confederates, and these ships had then been used not just in ordinary naval warfare, but to sink a great number of commercial cargo vessels and even passenger ships, not only in the waters in the Americas, but also here in Europe. And ultimately, the most prolific of those Confederate warships, the CSS Alabama, was sunk near Cherbourg. North American public and the American government was quite outraged about the fact that Britain had aided and abetted, as they would put it, the secessionists in this manner. I believe at the time there was even talk about annexing Canada in retaliation, so it's not necessarily a new proposition that's on the table here now.
But the concept sometimes
exactly.
Yes.
But in the end, they decided to resolve the dispute in a different manner. How did they do it?
Well, this was the stunning kind of shock, is that this is not an investor-state, it's a state-to-state conflict. The United States and Great Britain decide that they're going to resolve it by taking 5 lay individuals, obviously respected, esteemed lawyers, but they basically said, we're going to trust you to make a decision, and we are going to give you not only the subject matter jurisdiction, but even the sovereignty over us as governments. We will accept your sovereignty over us, which is astonishing, because that's not what nations normally do.
Especially in the 19th century, which is really the heyday of imperialism and,
yes. So the fascinating thing, and we can talk about why they did that. I think that's an interesting thing to look at in the context. But the important thing, I think, is that we want rule of law. We want to find a better way of resolving conflicts and constant war. They realized there would be a need. There'd already been the Washington Treaty and some other reasons why they, after the revolution even, they realized we need a better way of resolving
the Jay
conflicts.
Treaty. Yeah,
yeah, otherwise we'll be repeating conflicts.
And you don't get closure. Isn't that what it is about?
It's exactly, how do we get closure? And so this idea of taking a Brazilian, an Italian, a Swiss, obviously an American and a British as well, to say, you 5 people are going to decide, and we will follow what you say. We commit to accepting the sovereignty without any appellate system, was an astonishing sign at that time. Now, why was it in Geneva? Interesting, the president was not Swiss, it was an Italian, but the point was, this was a safe that was, I think, deemed already to be a neutral place. The room that I believe, at least the sentence, the award was decreed, was awarded, is the room that the first Red Cross Convention had been signed in. So there was already a tradition of diplomacy, of peacemaking, associated not only with Geneva, but with that room itself.
And this is where they did it. 5 arbitrators, 1 from the UK, 1 from the US, 3 from neutral countries, 1 from Italy, 1 from Switzerland, and 1 from Brazil, gathered here once in December 1871 and then twice more in 1872. The parties presented their cases, represented not by external counsel, as would be the case today, but only by government lawyers, although this case was worth 15 million USD in gold. In today's purchasing power, this translates into hundreds of billions of dollars. It was not the first time that this room was used in an internationally, particularly prestigious and highly politicized setting. A few years prior, in 1864, the Red Cross was started here on the initiative of Henri Dunant with the first Geneva Convention of 1864. But it was the Alabama case that lent the room its name, La Salle de l'Alabama, as it is still dubbed today. And in the end, this is also where the award was rendered. The United States were awarded the Relief Sword. It's a pretty brief award of just 15 or so pages, whereas the UK arbitrator rendered a dissenting opinion of some 250 pages.
You visited the room this morning and you'll have seen the plowshare that, in a way, symbolizes and epitomizes certain values that Geneva now has. And so when you take your credentials as a diplomat in Geneva, it is in that room that you receive your credentials. And it's Geneva constantly sending that message as an independent republic. So we're part of Switzerland, but that's only since 1815. Before that, we also had this reputation of neutrality because we were on this edge between the Catholic South and the Protestant North. And so this, our escalade that we've maybe seen us celebrate with our chocolate pots is really our Independence Day. We remember that this was the place that was neither, fully Protestant nor fully Catholic, but a kind of a mosaic, a mixture of everything, which is what these mosaics also help remind us of.
So for posterity, because the internet doesn't forget anything, we are shooting this in March 2025. These are difficult times, it appears, for multilateralism. What's the legacy of Geneva and the Alabama? What does it have to say, to speak to us for the future?
Look, I would say that there's a greater need than ever for somewhere in the world to still keep the hope of multilateralism alive. This is a city that is dedicated to multilateralism, but bilateralism as well. I mean, we have here very unusual activities in Geneva when it comes to peacemaking as well. We were talking about Henri Dunant for the Red Cross, but there was also the Centre Henri Dunant, today called the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, that is just on the banks of Lake Geneva. And they still work with intractable conflicts. They will basically get rebels, governments to meet privately. You're in a villa by the edge of the lake. You can talk. The setting has an impact. And we know from neuroscience that just the venue itself, the seating, the food, the arrangements, they have an impact on people's ability to feel in group and to settle and to create trust. Because ultimately, that's what it's all about. Humans trusting one another and being able to reach agreement. So Geneva does that still. I would say it remains still a very international cosmopolitan city. At least roughly half of the city, 50%, are of foreign origin. There's a high turnover of people, not just UN or academia, it's also corporations, finance, a lot of coming and going from Geneva as well, a lot of languages spoken here. The International School of Geneva has 180 nationalities, 80 mother tongues. So there's a lot of reasons that I think converge to why this place is and can continue to be relevant, not just in the field of arbitration, but I think in conflict resolution more generally. Diplomacy, mediation, conciliation, and even we're seeing now mixed modes, how to combine these different concepts. If we do create in Geneva an international court someday, an international commercial court, that should also be a place that takes into account this tradition of an open door courthouse that can also stimulate and allow arbitration and mediation and conciliation to thrive in combination with a court system. And other countries are doing this, and I think Geneva has all the ingredients for the mayonnaise to continue to take, as they say in French, and to succeed in the field of conflict prevention and resolution.
So to wrap it up, we're standing here amidst the cannons, but we're also standing in front of the mosaics that represent all these very diverse influences that have shaped the city, and that can perhaps be summed up by saying that if we don't continue talking to each other, trading with each other, we'll be in a very difficult place. And that is perhaps what Geneva has to share for the world to come.
And people must talk because they can, is the ultimate message in a way. And Geneva is this place, a city of peace that people are still comfortable coming to. And everybody feels this sense of neutrality. So yes, and for many reasons, Switzerland has always been ranked in the top 4 or 5 jurisdictions for international arbitration. I'm hoping that will continue to be the case as we continue to evolve and modernize and understand that it's not just about warfare, it's about technology, it's about all sorts of new things, even for COVID with the World Health Organization. Yes. There are many issues that need to be discussed and resolved in Geneva. I think will continue to play a role in that arena, at least I hope so, for at least another 2 millennia to come.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Returning to Geneva after all these years, I see the city not just as a memory, but as a living lesson. The Alabama Hall, the Red Cross, the Reformation Wall, it all reminds us justice doesn't just belong in courtrooms. It begins with conversation. Geneva is more than a city. It's a symbol of compromise over conquest, of unity beyond borders. Geneva today can sometimes feel like that ridiculously affluent, carefree bubble detached from the world's pains and sorrows. And yet, as the world grows more complex, Geneva's legacy calls us back to a simple truth. We must talk because we can.